This is Phil Bell, Director of External Relations here at FreedomWorks, and welcome to another episode of Save the Nation Today. And with us, I am incredibly excited to talk to our very own Reverend C.L. Bryant, one of my favorite people here at FreedomWorks. C.L., welcome to this table.
Well, thank you so much, my good friend, Phil Bell.
It's Black History Month. We hear about it all the time. Everyone's saying Black History Month up and down. There's a lot of talk about discrimination, segregation, you name it. You can't turn on the TV without hearing somebody talk about how supposedly prevalent it is and how much supposed oppression's out there. Tell me about your story and tell me what you think of that.
It seems that fanning the historical, emotional flames of Black people in this country has become an art. And Phil, there's no one more skilled in that art as those who possess or who embrace a socialist communist ideal. And that ideal is to make everyone walk, talk, and perhaps even think the same way. And so how do you do that? You use an emotional club to hit them with and to spur them on with. When they become lazy in achieving the things that that particular party or platform wants to achieve, then what do? They hit them with the historical, emotional whip of the pains of those, yes, who were enslaved in this country. My great-grandparents were among them, and evidently yours were among them as well.
They were.
But this is the idea of discrimination in today's 2022 America. It is to be used as a whip to drive those who are currently locked or have been locked in a mindset for over 60 years, particularly, into a pen, a corral where they cannot, in their minds, escape. And so that's what the discrimination, that's what all of this race baiting is about in today's America.
So now, as someone who has lived through segregation, what do you think when you see someone like a professional athlete, whether we're talking about Colin Kaepernick or somebody like that, or even the current Brian Flores situation? Do you see that as being congruent with what you experienced?
No.
Or, okay.
No. My father was a friend of Maury Wills. He played for the Dodgers.
He knew Maury Wills?
Oh, yes.
Wow.
In fact, my father was a friend of Maury Wills and met Jackie Robinson on occasion. The athletes of today don't do it, in my estimation, for necessarily the love of the game. The black cats being let loose on a baseball field when there were black athletes, baseball players on that field. The real word, not the N word, but the real word being hurled from the stands at an athlete, not because he is a lousy athlete, because he dropped a pass. These were being hurled because of the color of their skin. And you have athletes now who have every opportunity to be anything they want to be in a country that was not that country when Jackie Robinson or Maury Wells was playing the game. They are actually enjoying the fruits of what someone else paid for. Maury Wells never made not even an inkling of the money.
Right.
That
and
any of
work
these
in the off season, right?
Exactly right. He had to have another job. Jim Brown, even though he had to go into acting to make money, but he still never made. Jim Brown, perhaps the greatest running back ever was. He never made even the money that an O.J. Simpson had made. But yet you have a Colin Kaepernick and those types of people who are making millions of dollars off of the race hustling that they have bought into. And in fact, they are becoming wealthy doing. So it's a farce that is being launched against the American spectator as far as sports is concerned. And it is a distortion of the price that was paid for those who did in fact pay the price for the modern day athlete, black athlete in particular, to make the type of money that he's making.
You're right. And that brings me to another very, very important question that's been on my mind for a long time. You and I are both conservatives, but we live in a world where conservatives, despite all that we've done for civil rights, and you think about someone like Everett Dirksen, who brought his caucus on to get the Civil Rights Act passed, we are always viewed as being the total opposite of being pro-civil rights. How did that happen? And what can we do to take back the leadership that we earned?
The old saying in the black community was, King had a dream, Jesse had a scheme, and that is true. What has happened is that when Dr. King died, there were those who came in who saw it was easy then to extort white American companies because now you were playing for affirmative action, which, of course, we did need to level a playing field because the playing field was, I remember when the playing field was unlevel. I remember that. But I always ask a question, Phil, and that question is to any black American or to any American, period. Is there anything in America today that the color of my skin will stop me from doing if I want to do it? When I was growing up, oh man, there were a whole lot of things that the color of my skin would stop me from doing. Riding on the front of the bus was one of them. I didn't ride in the back of the bus, and I have ridden on the back of the bus. I've drank from colored and white water fountains, and I got to tell you, the water's the same in both of them. But the thing is this, that was not a choice. That was the law. And so when we look at the hustlers, like, and we know who they are, the usual suspects, and I might as well call their names, Sharpton and Jackson have made a fortune.
Sure have.
They made a fortune off of race hustling. And so when we look at where they have brought the black community, you see that they have led them into a corner. There's nowhere for them to go. They either have to throw off the mindset that they have bought into so readily and easily through many times hearing from the black church, unfortunately. But now they have to throw that off. But they don't want to be conservatives like you and I because they've called us such ugly names. And if they throw that off, then where do they go? They have painted themselves, and they painted themselves into a corner because of the people they have been following over that period of time. Why are black folks still angry? Why are black folks still mad? It's because they have been following the same type of leadership for all that time, promising them the moon, but giving them nothing but a dark, dead end corner. But there's an awakening going on, Phil, that I do believe that will shake this entire nation.
So, CL, you were a Democrat.
Yes,
and
sir.
not a lot of people who listen to you know that. So tell me about being a Democrat and being the head of the NAACP and what brought you over to the conservative Republican side.
Growing up in Louisiana, the ideal among black people, or the idea among black people, was that Republicans were white and wealthy. And we had been fed the idea that Democrats were for the working man. Roosevelt had planted that in the minds of black people. And if you'll notice, and I'm saying this to be funny, but it's true. One of the reasons why men of my father's generation, right before mine, or men right in between my father's generation and mine, were called Roosevelt, black men, was because of Franklin Roosevelt. That's why they were called Roosevelt.
And we got a family friend who's a Roosevelt.
Yeah. And that's why his name is that. But yes, I was president of the NAACP. I was a Democrat. The magnet schools in Garland, Texas right now became a reality under my watch there. And we faced a lot of skinhead challenges and Klan challenges when we were trying to create these magnet schools as on my tenure as NAACP president. But now I understand they have a year's waiting list for those magnet schools. And so the evolution of America from where I was, and that was in the mid to late 80s, I left there in the 90s, has certainly taken place. But there's been even more of an evolution from the time that I was a child up until this point. We just don't live in the same America.
Right.
that we were living in at that point in time. As a child, my mother and I attended that rally at Galilee Baptist Church, my home church. Reverend Dr. Edward Jones, pastor, was my pastor for over 50 years, rest his soul. He instilled in us that this was a time when we all had to pull together because we were all in the same boat.
Right.
Black people didn't own their house. If you didn't live in the country, you lived in what they called a shotgun house. My father, being an entrepreneur like he was, had built his house because he had made money. He was always a man who could show the American dream in the way he performed.
And now what did he do?
My father was a restaurateur. In fact, he was a maitre d' of one of the most prominent clubs, still is, the Shreveport Club in Shreveport, Louisiana. All of your wealthy individuals were members of that club, governors and senators. They all came there for parties and so forth. And so Dad had a certain influence in the community, and he instilled in me that to be politically active. I became a member of the NAACP when I was 7 years old. Dad bought me a lifetime membership.
Wow.
And so I've always been a member, but it was Democrat. But it was nonpartisan at the time. You could be black. There were many black people who were Republicans back when I was growing up because they were still alive from their parents had been freed from slavery by Lincoln. And so there were still many people who were black Republicans when I was growing up, and they were members of the NAACP that was founded by some who were Republicans. And so the evolution that has taken place in this country up until now is widely ignored. A story I was sharing with you and Hannah Catherine and Katrina Destry a little bit earlier was this one. The courage, not the anger, but the courage and the outrage of being treated less than a man, of being treated less than a woman, when others were being treated fairly and equally, was the driving force behind the civil rights movement, behind my mother and my father and Mamie Love and people like that who were very active in Louisiana. Now you operate from a point of anger. No one listens to anyone else. The civil rights movement became a reality because Dr. King was able to get America to listen to what he was saying, not by burning things down or tearing things down or threatening lives. Dr. King got America to listen and then see their own soul, and that it was being blackened by the inequities of what was going on to its citizens who happened to have dark skin. And so now we see the anger. Now we see the destruction of what Marxist and socialist ideals can do and can do to poisoning the bloodstream of a nation. There was a purification that was going on when Dr. King was alive. The bloodstream of America was being purified because we were seeing ourselves. Now, the same type of poison that Bull Connor and George Wallace were accused of then, black people are doing it now to themselves.
Absolutely.
And see, that is the entire fallacy that we're seeing. And I'm able to tell you this from a historical perspective because if you're not over 50 years old, and some people who are over 50 years old don't know the story of how we came from here to here and how grateful we should be to be in this land of the free and still the home of the brave.
Now, I'll close with a controversial question. You just mentioned what it was like to see some being treated equally and others as being treated less than. We have, because of COVID, vaccine mandates. So if you don't present a piece of paper, you can't eat in a restaurant, but you can go and take food out. You can't go to a gym, you can't go to a show. A lot of the rhetoric that I've heard in creating and implementing these sounds a lot like the rhetoric I heard when reading about a lot of the times that you just described. Do you see any of the same, I guess, parallels now? And do you see that as being dangerous, or am I off base on that?
We're being swindled, hoodwinked, and bamboozled right in front of our own eyes when we have common sense to look at the Super Bowl that took place in Tampa last year. There were something like 85,000 people in that bowl. 95% of them had no mask on. Not one death from that gathering has been reported. So the American people, for whatever reason, have become so sheepish now that we don't even resemble ourselves anymore. We're not the type of people who sheep herders can just herd into a corral, but that's what we're becoming. And I don't think that we see that. And then when we look at folks out and about, I want you to notice this, Phil, both of us being two black conservatives and both of us who are defiant in the way we are against government overreach in our lives. You will see people who are black and those who are elderly, scared and misinformed. We have John Hopkins has told us that all of this thing that we have done, all of the herding, all of the sheep herding that has gone on in this country, it goes right along with, here in Black History Month, the distortion of American values. And in Black History Month, let me tell you, Phil, there's been an incredible distortion of African American values, if I can say that, because that's where our roots are in Africa. Yeah. Jesse coined the African American thing. Jesse Jackson coined the African American thing. But Black America is being led to a place where even our ancestors, while they were in slavery, never thought we'd ever be led to again. And so that's the long and that's the short of who we are and where we are in this country at this time. We're being led like sheep because, Phil, regardless of what anyone says, you and I are here in the nation's capital on national platforms, black as we are, but we're free as anyone else.
Well, those are some powerful words, CL, and let's hope that the rest of America hears that before we as sheep get shorn.
You betcha. Thank you so much for having me on, friend.
Thank you.